Moving on then, we have the Cauldron of Blood. I'm sure you're probably viewing a theme here with a lot of these Chaos weapons. This thing has a huge cauldron full of bubbling demonic ichor, which showers the foes with, quote, molten lava.
So I ran into two variants of this actually. The first one is this little dinky thing that looks like it's literally made of skulls, has a couple wheels on it, and drives around shooting quote unquote molten lava of red hot demon blood at people. So you have a trench killing weapon. The armor is very poor. The vehicle is extremely small. And the vehicle is ineffective against anything that is not infantry. Period. Then I ran into another version of it. This one being a converted Land Raider.
Ooh.
A Land Raider Crusader edition with 12 bolters strapped to the sides of it, and a twin-linked assault cannon on the front, and then on top of it this giant skull with a cauldron of blood that it fires out of the nose of the skull. And the skull looks like it's literally made from demon tissue and bone, rigged together in the shape of a skull. So if you're going to take a Land Raider and turn it into this, okay, that's a hell of a terror weapon. And that is a hell of a trench killer. It appears as though Chaos is made for one thing in particular: assaulting fortifications over and over again.
And scaring the shit out of people.
And, yeah, generally scaring the shit out of people. The ram on the front of the smaller one, I don't even see what's the point. It's not large enough to really ram anything. Maybe it's to sweep aside dead bodies, I'm not sure, but that just seems impractical. Or it's to sweep aside stuff, so it's a wheeled vehicle, by the way. It's to sweep aside stuff so the wheels don't get caught in something. The Land Raider version is kind of really, I would say, insanely powerful at killing infantry. And I fully approve.
There's a lot of things we can notice with these Chaos vehicles so far. They're good at infantry killing.
Yes, they're not very good at armor killing.
No. So next up, we have a bit bizarre one. The Plague Tower. It's the first one we've come across so far that isn't obsessed with blood. Instead, it's obsessed with pus. It's armed with a pair of demolisher cannons, a pus cannon, and a plague mortar. And it's also defended by swarms of Nurglings if people try to assault it in close combat. Nurglings being very small, disgusting little demons covered in pus, shit, flies, that kind of maggots, that kind of thing. So, this is the first one we've set for that. Mainly designed for breaking fortifications, it looks like. It was designed being more like a siege tower. But with all these little Nurglings swarming it, it's going to have some defense against people trying to assault and take it out from behind, I would assume.
The Nurglings are a good defense against assault, but for the most part, the Siege Tower, I found two variants of this one as well. The straight up Siege Tower variant with the rolling wheels. There are reasons we don't use these anymore. Giant target, no armor. Even if it is a living weapon as the rest of these have been, and it doesn't really actually have a quote-unquote crew, the fact it explodes in pus and filth when it dies is more of a threat to its allies than the enemy. Simply shooting a few las cannons at it a few times is going to rip it apart. I get it's Nurgle, I get it can probably regenerate somehow, but the fact of the matter is, it does not look like a very effective weapon. When I take measuring tools out, when I look at it, when I pick it up, I'm like, this thing is a joke, right? Now, the other version is again rigged onto the hull of a Land Raider. Nurgle, why? This particular hull of the Land Raider has had its side-mounted weapons replaced with Nurgling breeches. That is, giant doors that open up to release Nurglings in mass.
A tide, if you will.
A tide, and its plague boilers are on the sides of it, exposed to any incoming fire that could possibly be around. In addition to the fact that the upper superstructure has very little armor and relies on the flesh of demons, which I'm not quite sure what that is as far as an armor composition, to keep it protected rather than metal. Lastly, the Plague Mortar and Pus Cannon are strictly an anti-infantry weapon. Again, we're seeing an almost extreme focus on killing infantry. Imperial Guard, beware.
And a Tau.
The thing is, I'm not terribly worried about the Tau because they could penetrate the armor of most of these vehicles with their regular pulse rifles.
Oh.
The demon flesh armor doesn't really seem to give it very much armor at all.
The only thing I do know for certain, if it's demon flesh armor, that means it's going to be extremely weak to psychic-based attack. A Space Marine Librarian with a Force Sword can just walk up to it and just slice it open effortlessly.
Yeah, that is what I'm leaning towards. These later vehicles is just not looking very good. They seem to be set up in a very castle and mortar style siege instead of a modern 40k battlefield style of vehicle combat.
You know, Nurgle, he has a thing for the old-fashioned rustic stuff. I mean, he is the grandfather after all.
True.
He still thinks it's the Middle Ages. So we'll move on to the Subjugator. Now the Subjugator, it's quite large, the size of a Warhammer Titan, armed with sonic weaponry and tormentor cannons and Hellslicer battle claws. But the thing is, the armor in this thing, I can tell you right now, it's for a thing this size, it's pathetic. It's got the armor equivalent of that of a Space Marine Dreadnought. For something of this size, that's pathetic.
For something of this size, yes. It is pathetic. However, the armor is incredibly well sloped and angled in order to prevent a direct impact. The vehicle is significantly faster than a Warhound Titan. It actually has enough evasive agility to maybe be hard to hit. In addition, the Tormentor cannons don't actually kill you. They put you in unbearable agony.
Oh.
This can cause massive disruptions on the battlefield. Having your friend lying next to you, screaming, unable to do anything to console him or find the actual wound that he's screaming about, is pretty effective at getting an entire line of troops to break. The sonic weapons that were mounted on it are insufficient for penetrating most armored vehicles. This thing appears to rely on close quarters with those giant claws for actual close combat, and to actually hurt other armored vehicles, it relies on its melee weapons only. Meaning, the number one thing that can probably kill it, it has to get right up next to hack and slash it. Thank God for that extra speed, right?
Indeed.
Other than that, it is another extreme focus to killing infantry. Now, the armor is nicely sloped. It does apparently come with a void shield if you upgrade it. Whoop-de-doo. I'm not a particular fan of shields because they break very easily, in my opinion. And this is just one of those where I'm kind of questioning it until we factor in that apparently it is more skilled than Space Marines in close quarters combat.
Which is a big deal.
This is an ambush weapon again. Something you want to drop on top of your enemy, literally on top of them, and have it get immediately into close quarters. I could see a Warhound Titan falling to one of these things if it got too close, but if it tried to have a ranged fight with a Warhound Titan, it would lose. I could see one of these things tearing apart vehicle after vehicle if it got close enough to rip at them with its claws, but otherwise it would get shredded by a formation of Leman Russes opening fire on it. So it is strictly going to rely on hit and run tactics and its superior speed to get in and get out of the battle, while having just enough armor to not die.
Okay then. Next up, we got one that's very similar to one we've already encountered already. This one's called the Lord of Battles. It's very similar to the Lord of Skulls, but there is some fundamental differences. First off, instead of the massive cleaver, it's got a tank-sized chain fist. It's also armed with a Deathstorm multi-barrel projectile cannon and a Doom Burner, which is a large cannon that fires molten metal. And it also has a head-mounted cannon, and some versions also have hull-mounted flamethrowers.
Okay, so the Lord of Battle. Now, a lot of these should unquote, quote-unquote, be vulnerable to psychic, but apparently there are runes of the Blood God all over this thing in order to prevent psychic powers from affecting it. Next, I have seen it armed with a chain fist, a chain axe, a giant multi-sectioned whip with up to 6 whip heads, and no melee weapon at all, instead just strictly ranged weaponry. It's very intimidating to look at until I factor in its size. It's actually, apparently, if I've read this correctly and understood it correctly, it's about the size of a dreadnought.
Really?
Yeah. It apparently is just a really, really beefy variant of it. Its weaponry, however, is quite lethal. I'm not sure if I've read that correctly. Have I read that correctly?
I don't think you have, because I'm looking at some models now, and it's about the size equivalent of an Imperial Knight.
Okay.
Which are obviously smaller than Warhound Titans, but bigger than Dreadnoughts.
I kept trying to get a point of reference for a size comparison, and I was told that it was about the size of a dreadnought, and I went, are you sure? Because these are some pretty beefy weapons to go on a dreadnought. But
yeah, it's bigger than a Dreadnought, I can tell you that much now.
An Imperial Knight, so about halfway between...
The equivalent size of an...
About halfway between bigger than a Walker, but smaller than a Titan, basically. So is this thing like halfway between a Walker and a Titan, or about as big as a small Titan?
Well, it's smaller than the Warhound Titan, which was conventionally the smallest of the Titans, but it's a lot bigger than a Dreadnought. Okay. So think of it at the halfway point.
And there needs to be a halfway point if you were to ask me.
Yeah.
But problems I have with this thing. The propulsion system is just some plain old wheels that are exposed and made of metal. Very easy to disable its mobility. It actually has to rely on a plow out in front of it in order to protect its mobility. In addition to this, it is relatively slow. Again, it looks like another one of these siege weapon type of deals, rather than a true mobile Titan. Now, its weaponry is obscene. The amount of quote-unquote DACA you have squeezed onto this would make orcs blush.
Or jizz.
Wasn't sure orcs could do that, but okay. It's the multi-barrel cannon. Nice idea. I measured it as being about the equivalent of a Leman Russ battle cannon with 6 barrels instead of 1. The Doom Burner, I wasn't really terribly impressed, but the head-mounted weapon could be up to a miniaturized version of the plasma gun mounted on a Warhound Titan. I was like, ouch. That's kind of impressive. And additional hull-mounted flamethrowers would be a nice addition to keep the infantry away from it, so they wouldn't run up and start jumping up on it and throwing charges everywhere or slamming a melt-a-bomb here or there.
No.
The
I'm just impressed that it's got a chain fist the size of a tank in some variants.
Actually, the most impressive melee weapon I have seen on it is the chain axe that's bigger than its body. It can wield that. The strength of force in the arms must be obscene. You're saying?
So in essence, you could turn around and say that he's got a massive chopper.
He's got a massive chopper.
And I think that reference just went right over your head, didn't it?
No, it did not. I can see a bunch of orcs pointing at it and saying, "Get that chopper!"
No, that's not the reference I'm on about.
What's the reference you're on about?
Well, saying in England at least, saying someone's got a massive chopper means they got a big cock.
Oh, well, damn. Apparently,
there you go.
he's compensating.
You know some English slang now.
Yay, English slang. The back of this vehicle is incredibly exposed, though. I can see all the wiring, I can see all the actuators. Basically, if you get behind it, it dies. So this vehicle does have to rely on infantry support to keep it alive. In addition to this, it's not terribly well armored. The only slope armor point is at the center of the torso. Other than that, the armor is pretty flat and relatively thin for the size of the vehicle. And this is not made up for with speed. It is actually not the fastest thing in the world. So, yay on firepower, boo on protection and mobility.
Yeah, I think they got their priorities a little bit mixed up here.
They seem to really want to kill infantry. A lot.
Well, there's a demon ninja of Khorne. He likes to get, up close and personal.
Very true. Which I believe brings us to the last.
Yes, which is a bit of a weird one, let's be honest. The Blood Reaper. This is just a big tower with a whole bunch of guns sticking out of it.
Dear Chaos. Dear Chaos. I write to you on behalf of engineers everywhere to kindly explain to you that siege towers don't work anymore! The armor is completely flat. The weapons are extremely limited in what you can mount on it. It's a wheeled vehicle with no protection for the wheels themselves. And the plow on the front doesn't even go low enough to actually clear out the stuff in front of it as it's rolling along. It can only fight stuff directly in front of it, which means you have to turn the vehicle to aim most of the guns. We stopped using tankettes in the 60s for a reason. If you didn't have a turret, you weren't really welcome anymore.
No.
And in this case, this is another siege tower. And I'm going to go ahead and say, every single siege tower we have seen is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
You're a big, giant, hulking target with no armor and no speed. Congratulations.
I'm just kind of more worried if, a Titan Sergeant just steps near it, it's probably going to just tip it over.
Quite possibly, that is one of the biggest issues I have with it, is it's very top-heavy. I mean, in comparison to the other siege towers that were middle and bottom-heavy, this thing is extremely top-heavy. And a direct hit from a cannon might actually cause it to fall over if it doesn't penetrate the armor.
Which would be embarrassing, let's be honest.
It would be hilarious! I'm beginning to wonder if the front plow on this one isn't so much for moving things out of the way as for ballast.
Well, apparently it's designed to actually impale infantry that's in its way.
It's designed to impale infantry?
So if it's going to be impaling something, it must be able to go at some speed. Yes.
It goes at some speed, yes, but it's not fast enough to dodge incoming fire, and it's most certainly not fast enough to be an evasive target for a Lumen Rust battle cannon, or an Eldar Wave Serpent gun, or a Fire Prism, or, dare I say it...
anything squat related.
anything that's designed to kill tanks. Even a crack missile is going to easily be able to lead and hit this target, because it almost goes in a straight line. Go.
And with how top-heavy this thing is anyway, if it's going to be turning a corner at some speed, it's going to end up being like a Reliant Robin for you petrol heads out there. It's going to be like one of those Reliant Robin cars. It's going to turn, it's going to flip, and you're going to have Jeremy Clarkson trying to get out of it while wishing for Peter Stringflood to flip it over. Oh, Cookie, if you get the reference, by the way.
I'm not that English. However, that is kind of a hilarious image to go through my head.
On this episode of Top Gear, Jeremy Clarkson tries out a Lord of Battle and fails.
Miserably, apparently. Yes, but this, Chaos, get your shit together. I know you can make some truly awesome vehicles, and so far you kind of did not impress me with your emphasis on Suedo walkers and siege towers.
In fairness, for a lot of anti-armor variants, they do use a lot of Imperial-style vehicles such as Land Raiders, Predators, etc. This is more.
No, but they're unique vehicles. I would have thought would have been much more. We hate the Imperial Guard, not just we hate the Imperial Guard's infantry. Well, what are they going to do when the Steel Legion shows up with nothing but tanks? Fight them with Space Marine tanks?
Or just try and get close enough to smack them.
Yeah, they're going to have to just get close enough. Good luck with that.
Because I can imagine, at least on the Lord of Battle, if it's got a chain fist the size of a tank, it's probably going to be quite good at chopping up tanks.
Quite so. But I believe that brings us to the end of the list of Chaos vehicles we have here.
Yes, it does. And there were some interesting designs here. A lot of terror weapons, which is appropriate for Chaos, let's be brutally honest. So how they rank on the scale we have so far? We have squats at the top, and who did we have at the bottom? It was the Inquisition, wasn't it? Or was it the Eldar? I can't remember.
The Eldar were at the bottom.
The Eldar still at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So where did Chaos come in this list, in this ranking?
Somewhere in the lower middle. Not. They're really relying on a lot of Imperial vehicles rather than their own unique vehicles for their main anti-armor ability. They don't really impress me very much with their huge emphasis on using vehicles strictly as terror weapons and anti-infantry. And I don't know how to judge them other than that.
Fair enough then. So you need two choices left for next week's episode. Do you want a special on walkers or do you want the Tyranids? Let us know in the comment section below. In the meantime, this has been Remlays from 40K Theories.
And this has been Fiaura.
And we'll see you all again next time.